Alright guys, so this is going to be a video for those of you that bought the Eachine Wizard V2 plug-and-play version, the one without the receiver, and you don't have any goggles or anything like that, or a controller. So this is going to be a setup guide specifically for this model. Now I have a more general video on how to set up most quadcopters in Betaflight. I'll link that video down in the description if you want like a more generalized video for just about any drone. This one's going to cover this specific drone here. So if you need answers to questions that are more general for it's going to be more applicable to other drones, you may want to check out that other video. So for this example here, I'm going to be using the parts from the Novice 4, the Eachine Novice 4, which is the Radiomaster TX12 transmitter and the Eachine EV800DM goggles. These are the goggles that came with the Novice 4. And I'm going to be using the same receiver that came with the Novice 4. It's this one here. This is the Radiomaster R81 receiver. It's got dual diversity antennas. It's an S-Bus FreeSky compatible receiver. And I recommend getting this one over an XM Plus because these days, depending upon where you buy the XM Plus from, you may get some different firmware on it. And I have noticed that lately a lot of people that are buying XM Plus receivers are getting ones with access firmware on them. And you can use those, but then you have to flash it to older firmware to make it compatible with these other parts here, because access is only works with FreeSky components. So that's why I recommend getting this one, because this one will just work. It'll work in D8 mode, and it'll work with these two parts here. Now, obviously, if you have the Novice 4 and you have the controller and the goggles ready, this is going to be perfect. But if you don't, that's fine. I still recommend this transmitter. This is a good beginner transmitter, and these are good general goggles. Now, obviously, goggles are going to be very subjective. You're going to probably want to review or look at a bunch of reviews on different goggles to see what you might like. You may want to invest more money than this into something a little bit nicer. Really kind of depends. Goggles are going to be very, very subjective. So these are good. This will fit most people. But, you know, if you have eyes or have a hard time focusing on screens that are close to your eyes, if you have some crazy prescription glasses, you may have some trouble with this and you may want to look at something else. I would recommend, if you do have prescription glasses that are smaller that could fit into a goggle, I would recommend getting the SkyZone Cobra X goggles. I'll link those down in the video description. I also have a review video on that one. That one is quite a bit more expensive than these, but that one's going to be better for those of you that use glasses that have a hard time finding goggles that work with you. This will be more of a goggle that will work for most people, but if you have like a specialized case, then try out the Cobra X or the Cobra S goggles. You can use glasses with those, and those are also very good goggles. So first thing we need to do is we need to get the receiver installed. So we'll go ahead and take the top off of here. So you're going to need a 2 millimeter hex driver, and I take off actually, I only need to take off 4 screws. You need to take off this one here. It's 3 screws. This one here, the center one right here, and camera won't focus. Yeah, this one right here. And the 2 in the back and this top plate will come off. They'll give you access to the stack. Okay, so here's the top off of it. And you can see the flight controller right here. The video transmitter is kind of in the way, but the only thing that we need is this plug here. We're going to cut off this servo connector and solder the other end to the receiver. I'll show you that obviously here in a second, but all we need to do is unplug this from the back of the flight controller, and after we've soldered this wire to the receiver, we can plug this back in. So simple as that. It's the one on the top right there, not the one on the bottom. If you want to use some other type of receiver and radio, I would recommend following this sort of a generalized guide in that video that I linked in the description. Not going to cover every possible radio. It's impossible to cover every possible radio out there. I know that some of you probably might want to go Spectrum or FlySky perhaps. I would say that if you're going to go get the FlySky radio and do all this work, just get the version of this that comes with the FlySky radio. and it's already pre-bound and everything. So I'll link that as well down in the description. Just get that one instead, because then you don't have to do any of this work. It'll all come pre-bound and pretty much ready to go out of the box without having to go jump through all these hoops. If you want to do spectrum, there's a bunch of different spectrum radios and receivers that you can possibly try. It doesn't work with S-Bus, so it won't work with this little plug here. You'll have to, it's going to be more complicated, because I'm pretty sure you're going to have to get this video transmitter off of here, get access to the flight controller. You'll have to do some soldering. It's going to be quite involved. So unfortunately, I don't even have any Spectrum gear myself, so I can't even demonstrate that for you. But I do know that Spectrum can be quite involved in terms of trying to get the flight controller to work with that. So if you don't have anything, which is obviously the kind of the point of this video, I would recommend staying away from Spectrum, because generally speaking, the setup in the future is going to be more difficult for you compared to a lot of the FreeSky versions that are things. Most of the drones that come out from a lot of the pre-built drones are going to come mainly geared towards people that fly FreeSky and not Spectrum. So something to keep in mind if you're kind of wondering which way you should go, FreeSky or Spectrum. I would recommend this radio here. This one can do Spectrum receivers as well, because it's multi-protocol, I believe. Actually, I'm sorry, this one does not. The TX12 does not. This one Radio Master. The Jumper T12 does, but this one does not. This one only does FreeSky. So yeah, I would still, again, see, this is another thing. Like, everything is kind of geared towards FreeSky. So I would recommend going to that ecosystem over the Spectrum one if you're thinking about which one you want to get. Okay, so basically, it's pretty simple from this point on. You're going to get your receiver here, and there's going to be 3 pads you're going to want to pay attention here. And this is going to be hard to show on camera. It's very tiny. You see an S there, that's the signal. A plus, that's the 5-volt positive, and a negative there on the bottom. And so what you're going to want to do here is we're going to cut off the end of this, and we're going to solder on those wires. So the yellow is going to be your signal, the black is ground, the negative, and the red is going to be your positive, that middle one. I'm not going to show you the soldering on here. There's a lot of soldering how-to videos on the internet. This one should be pretty simple. Basically, cut it off, strip off a little bit of the insulation. This is kind of crappy plastic insulation, and just solder it on. I'll show you what that looks like. Obviously, if you don't know how to solder, I would recommend going on the internet, looking at a bunch of soldering how-to tutorials, which is like, there's probably hundreds of thousands of videos on YouTube how to do that. And I would recommend practicing on something other than the actual parts you're going to use. Maybe some old electronics, some junk stuff that you have in a parts bin or something. Practice on that first before you do your first soldering job. This is relatively easy for an experienced person, but this might be pretty difficult. These are very tiny wires, so try and practice on something tiny. See how good you can get. The key to good soldering, if you want to know the trick, is get a high quality soldering iron. Like I have a Hakko that I linked down in the description. Check that one out. It's like $100, totally worth the money. If you try and use one of those like $20, $10, cheap soldering irons, those generally don't work very well for these tiny electronics, because they don't generate enough heat to get the solder to melt properly, and you end up with a bunch of cold solder joints. It just turns into a big mess. So yeah, I would recommend investing in a high quality soldering iron, and that will get you a long way in this hobby. Anyway, go ahead and solder this up, show what it looks like, and then we'll put it back in here and then get to the setup part so you're connected to the radio and the goggles. All right, so here's what it looks like with that plug soldered onto the receiver. So that's what it should look like after you're done. Obviously, here's the other end of the plug that I cut off, and we just plug it in. Now I'm going to use the little antenna tubes on the TPU part here for the antenna wires, and then I have some extra antenna tubes here that I'm going to use. They came with a different model. This is what they look like. This one did not come with these, unfortunately, so I'll link these down in the description. You can pick these up. If you don't want to go buy those, then the other thing you can do is run the antenna wires, maybe zip tie them to the back of this TP part here, or put them on the arms underneath the wires here and use some zip ties so that they stick out in between the arms. There's a number of different ways you can do that, but it's just easier just to buy those little tubes. I think they're like a couple dollars, race day quads. All right, so I got the antenna wires routed through these little parts. I'll put the antenna tubes on there a little bit later, and then we just go ahead and plug this in. Okay, so once it's all plugged in, now we just have to power up the flight controller and bind the receiver to the controller. Go ahead and turn on our radio here. Now for this particular example, I'm going to use the pre-built model that's already in here. If you get a fresh Radio Master TX12, I don't know if this model is going to be in there or not. You may need to create a new model, in which case I think you just long press the model button here, and then yeah, there's going to be some pre-built ones like quad, for example. I think these are going to be there as well, and you can either long press the scroll wheel and make a copy of that, or you can select that model and then go in there and set it up. But I'm going to basically, the only difference is the channels for these switches here are going to be already set up in the pre-built model. If you set up a brand new model, you may need to go into the mixer to set that up. So basically, if you go in here to the model, it'll be on page 6 of 12. It's called mixes, and then you basically just set up these different channels here for your switches. And I don't know what the pre-built switches are going to be in here. I'm going to actually figure that out once I bind it, and then I'll show you if we need to make any adjustments here to these switches. Anyway, so go and turn the radio on, go into our model here, and then it's going to be already selected. Page over. This will be the setup page, and then you can scroll down or you can scroll up. You want to find where it says bind here, so you can see we're in FreeSky D8 mode. And we're going to be selecting that once the receiver is in bind mode. So we'll set this to the side. So I'm going to power the flight controller off of this tablet here. I'm actually going to be using the SpeedyBee app instead of Betaflight, just because you can pretty much use whatever you want. Most people use Betaflight on the desktop, but SpeedyBee app is pretty much like Betaflight is on the desktop. So you got basically to power this up, you got to, before you give power to the flight controller, you want to press and hold on the bind button here on the receiver, which is this right here, before you give it power. So while you're powering it up, you're going to hold this down, and then you get a green and a red solid light. That means it's in bind mode. So this one's a little pretty tiny, so you want to make sure you got it. It's a little tricky. All right, so we're going to power this up. Okay, so I just discovered that the flight controller has power, but the receiver does not. So it just does not, the flight controller does not give 5 volts to the receiver, so we have to use actually a battery while we're holding on the bind button. Okay, here's another little tool that I recommend you get is a smoke stopper, just in case anything got messed up at the factory. Not likely it's going to happen, but just in case, it's always a good thing to have. Also, before you give battery power, you want to make sure you put your video transmitter antenna here. Make sure that's already screwed on, otherwise you might burn out the video transmitter. So whenever you do that, set up a drone, you always want to make sure the antenna is on. So that is on. Plug in our smoke stopper here, and then I'm going to plug in the battery. And there's a button here that will give it power. Right now it doesn't have power. So this is always good to have as well for doing binding and such. So I'm going to hold down that bind button and give the drone power. Then hit bind here on the radio. Okay, so it's not working, so probably means that we need to make an adjustment to the frequency fine-tuning value here. I'm not sure what it is, so I'm going to try -5. This is pretty common with multi-protocol radios and FreeSky compatible receivers. We'll try bind now. All right, so let's try +5. All right. Now we got a blinking red light, so it's binding now. And I'm going to power cycle this. Okay, we got a solid red light now, and we can see here our RSSI is at 100 or over 100, so we're pretty close. All right, so now in Betaflight, we should be able to check if the control's working. It doesn't look like it's working, so something is wrong with the configuration here. Let's look at the setup. And where do we have serial RX? It says it's on UART 6 and serial based receiver S-bus. So it looks like it's set up, assuming that it's on the correct UART. I'll have to double check that. Okay, so I see RSSI working here now. Okay, so now it's working. Okay, that's kind of weird. It's possible that I'm too close. The radio is too close to the receiver. If you're too close, then try moving it away. But yeah, then now it's working. So aileron's working, elevator's working, rudder or yaw, throttle. And let's see which switch things are here. So okay, so this is the switch 1. Aux 1 is. Let's get this out of the way. So this one here is aux 1. This is aux 2. So this is switch E, switch B. So aux 2. They're all 3 position switches. C is probably aux 3, and this is aux 4. So this is the way this radio was set up with the Novice 4. I don't know. Let's see what the modes look like here. So for arming, we have aux 2, which is this one here. So you can see I moved it. You can see the hash mark there. It's in the middle, and at the bottom right there. So this is arming here. So in the middle position is not armed. They have to go all the way to the top position here, and this is the arm switch. So you can move these around if you don't like where the switches are. I'm just going to keep it where it is. So I have to try and remember this is the arm switch. Angle is on aux 1, and it looks like it's in the default switch position. It's turned on. So then to turn it off, just move it to the middle position or the high position here. This one here. That'll turn off angle mode. That's aux 1. Doesn't look like Horizon or any of the other ones are set up. Actually, nothing else is set up here. So basically you have your arm switch, which is going to be this one here all the way down or towards the bottom of the radio for arming, and then it'll be in angle mode. If you want to turn angle mode off, you just flip this switch up here. So it looks like in the Betaflight setup, it's not set up for the other 2 switches. You can change those if you want. This is not a full tutorial on Betaflight or OpenTX. It's just to get this thing off the ground and flying. So just keep in mind that it's this switch here for arming, and this one to switch out of angle mode and acro mode right here. And that'll get you going. All right, so now regarding the video transmitter, let's see what channel this is on. Okay, so looks like the VTX table is in here, but the band and channel power is not set up at all, interestingly. Let me just see what channel it might be on. Let's turn the goggles on. So I have power on here. And we'll just do a search. Okay, so it looks like, looks like it's broadcasting on channel frequency A2. I'm going to actually adjust that here. You can search for with the goggle, but I'm just going to put them in here so that you know what it is, because it might change. So I'm just going to select race band, channel 1, and 200 milliwatts. And we'll hit save. So to find your band and channel, it's long press here to change between band and channel, and then short press to change the actual value. It doesn't really show up here on the screen, but I'm going to see if I can show that to you. So long press, and I can see that the A is highlighted. Okay, hold on a second. There we go. B, C, D, R. Then we'll long press again to highlight the channel. And we'll find raceband 1. So there we go. So now we're in raceband 1, and this is the image we've caught. Okay, so now we have pretty much everything we need to fly. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect from Betaflight. And disconnect your USB cable. And I'm going to test the motor, so I have to disconnect this smoke stopper. Alright, so we're going to basically arm it on the bench here, do it with the props off, of course, just to make sure everything is working and the motors are spinning the correct way. And we do have video. I'm going to go ahead and arm it. Motors are spinning. See, motors are going this way, so it looks like it's going the way it's supposed to. Yeah, check all the motor directions. Yeah, so everything's going basically props in. So this is spinning this way, spinning this way, and then I make sure you put the props on correctly. So I'm just arming here. Go and unplug it. All right, one more very important thing you want to test before you fly, or actually put the props on and go fly, is make sure that failsafe is working. So we'll go ahead and arm it. Turn off the radio. And you should have the motors stop like this. Then you know that failsafe is working. If it just continues to spin, that's very bad. You'll need to go into your radio settings and make sure you have your failsafe set properly. This topic is quite convoluted because it depends on the receiver you're using and the radio you're using. This one here didn't have to actually do anything. I think this receiver has failsafe set up out of the box. But if you're using a different receiver, you have to consult the documentation for your receiver or your radio. It's going to really depend on what equipment you're using. But if you're using this particular receiver and this radio setup, if you're using this like this, you don't have to do anything. I didn't do anything. It just worked. So, but you do want to test to make sure it's working in case you have a failsafe, you don't have the drone fly off on you. Okay, that's it for this one. Yeah, so everything looks like it's all set up and ready to go. Now I just got to put the props on, put obviously the top plate back on. I'm going to actually connect this up here, this GoPro mount. Basically I have to unscrew these, put that on so we can get some GoPro footage. That's about it for getting this going. Let me just show you what the props should look like when you put them on. Okay, so on the props there's a little arrow here on the way it's supposed to be spinning. So let's get this in here correctly. So this is the front of the quad over here. This is the back of the quad over here. This is motor 1, 2, 3, and 4. Basically the motors are going to spin clockwise on motors 1 and 3. Counterclockwise on 1 and 4. On 2 and 3 it's going to be counterclockwise. So this one is a clockwise spinning prop, and this is with the mark on the top like this. So this is going to put the clockwise props on this one here, on this motor here, and on this one over here. And the counterclockwise, this one like this, it's going to go on motors 2 over here and motor 3 over here. And that's pretty much it. You just have to use that little carbon fiber wrench or some other tool to get the props on. These props these have reverse nuts. So basically this one screws on normally, and this one is the opposite. And that's pretty much it. So next video you'll see is I'll have this up and flying. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments. So long as it's a long video. Talk to you guys in the next one.